Hi. Welcome to our new Tuesday charlas. We have moved them to Tuesdays instead of Thursdays. Thursdays were just really hard schedule-wise, so we decided to move them to Tuesdays instead. Minutes to join us. Hey, friends.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Your hair looks really nice.
Oh, thank you.
It's getting really long, really fast.
Yeah, my hair grows like really, really fast. So, yeah, it's getting there. How are you?
I'm good. Hey,
Good.
Sid. Hey, Brad. Got a few people that usually tune in. That's nice.
Yeah. What was the happiest part of your day today, Mars?
Probably my cat, because that's always the happiest part of my day.
Aw.
And she's scratching up Janice's couch. Stop it, Catalina. She really loves that couch. She just scratched the crap out of it, but whatever. Anyway, what about yours?
Honestly, I think when I got home, I'm so tired today.
Oh,
Yeah, I had a good day. I had a very busy day, but I'm just tired. So getting home and eating something, I didn't like pack a lunch, and I was gone all day, and I was starving. So I made like huevos fritos and some toast, and I I remember on the bus, I was like, on the bus ride home, I was like, I'm gonna make frijoles and like arroz, and I'm gonna make tortillas. And then I got here and I was like, fuck it, I'm not doing any of those things. I just want to eat like now.
exactly. Yeah. Who's got the time? Nobody's got the time.
Who's got the time? No.
Well,
No.
that's glad that you got to enjoy your feast or your meal. Um,
Yeah.
Give it a few more minutes just to get everyone situated, and then we can get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited for this Thursday charla
Yeah,
because we're going to talk about some pretty important stuff.
yeah, I
It'll
agree.
be good. It'll be really good. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Hey, hey, Sid. It's going to be a good day. Hey, Brad. Oh, I'm still hungry, actually.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm still really hungry.
I'm
Whatever, I'll
surprised
have a snack later.
you didn't take anything with you.
Huh?
I'm surprised you didn't take anything with you to work.
So I don't have any more snacks in my work bag anymore. So there was that. And then I left I like wrapped up a meeting and then I was like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
So I threw myself together when I ran out the door. And yeah, I didn't bring a water bottle today. I didn't bring
Oh,
like any coffee. And I realized like I don't have a key for my office yet. So I when I was leaving, I was like, I really hope I don't like because I left like quite late and the
hmm.
office is only open till 4:30. So I was like, and it was like 20 after 5 by the time I left. So I
Oh,
was like,
shoot. Yeah.
I hope I don't like need
PM,
anybody to lock up behind me. And yeah, it was weird. But
PM,
whatever. Como?
PM or AM?
Oh, I
Like,
left at like 20 after 5 p.m., not
oh,
a.m.
work? Oh, you left the office.
Yeah, I
Okay, so
left the office.
I
Yeah.
thought you left to go to the office. Like that is late, but you do you. Some people do that. Like I don't know, no judgment. Some people like to work after everyone's gone. I have a few friends that are like that, to be honest. They
No.
get a lot more done when nobody's around. I'm like, I get that. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we dive into it?
Yeah, we can totally dive into it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about the demonstration that we had here in Edmonton. There was a march in solidarity with the Wetsuweten that is under attack by the federal government. There was an injunction that was passed by the courts in British Columbia that basically granted rights for CGL to continue building their pipeline. And the Wet'suwet'en have been fiercely defending their territory, as most of you are aware. That the well, I mean, I would hope that most of you are aware that a lot of BC is unceded territory. Most of BC is unceded territory, and so the Wet'suwet'en are defending their ancestral lands. And currently with the climate crisis that we're seeing in the country, where a lot of British Columbia is underwater. We're experiencing like massive flooding. There has been some significant deforestation, particularly of like these really like beautiful, like mature treed areas with some of the trees, like in the thousands, estimated to be thousands of years old, that were being chopped down to make way for this pipeline. And so there's just a lot. There's a lot happening. And so we wanted to kind of give this Thursday Charla to kind of explain what was going on, talk a little bit about it. Mars, do you have any thoughts on that right now off the top of your head?
Top of my head, yeah, like obviously it's hilarious. September 30th was Memorial Day, and of course all of the made a big show about like the Trudeau government dubbed it a national holiday. Federal employees got like that day. Provinces, not ours, actually did honor it, gave their employees like the day to actually learn about Indigenous culture and really honor the children who we found like recently. We've known that they were buried and that they were victims of residential schools, but it wasn't until recently that we actually found their unmarked graves. We made a whole big show as a country to like be like, oh well, as child matters, and Indigenous sovereignty need to be, we need to be better to our Indigenous, to the Indigenous community. We need to be, better about like the things that happened historically, and we need to learn about these things so we don't repeat. But then on one hand, but on the other hand, all of the government, including the NDP, because that is the government that is in power in BC, the Liberals and all of them are really showing their true colors by abusing their power with military might. Like they're going to they're arresting a whole bunch of activists. They're arresting journalists right now that are covering what's happening there, and so it's very hypocritical. A few months ago they were like, yes, let's all for Indigenous lives. Now they're so it's to be expected, and I know that sounds really sad, but honestly, like I'm no longer shocked by anything that happens, to be honest. Like I feel like these last 2 years have really shown me the true colors of a lot of people. I feel like there are some people who have gotten a lot more empathy, a lot more compassion, have grown spiritually and mentally, and all of those things. There's another camp of people who have just become more selfish, more sick, and worse. And so it's really interesting to see that tug of war of people, and that's why it's politicized, to be honest, because they're like everything is moral. And to be honest, like be real here, politics are a moral issue. If you think that politics are not a moral issue, then you are completely naive, or you're really privileged and you're not aware of that. But anyway, so that's my 2 cents, top of my head.
No, for sure. So there's a lot going on, and there's kind of a lot to unpack in this situation here. Yesterday there was a press release that went out with regards to the land offenders who were arrested. They appeared in court yesterday, and it was a press release by Gitimdin that basically condemned, the punitive actions that were taken against the land offenders. 20 people were arrested in a 2-day. It was a very violent raid on Wet'suwet'en territory and were forced to appear in front of the BC Supreme Court in Prince George, and that was yesterday that they appeared. Those arrested include Gitimdin checkpoint spokesperson Slato and Denise Wu's daughter, Jocelyn Alec, as well as 2 journalists. And one of the issues is that, there has been like this intentional erasure of like any news that's coming out of there, like a censorship that's been happening all over social media. People who are trying to talk about what's happening are finding that their accounts are being shadow banned, that their posts are being taken down. And so it's like this calculated effort to try to censor any information coming out about the violence that's being perpetrated against the land offenders. And so the two journalists, Amber Bracken and Michael Toledano, were arrested. And I think it says a lot about a country when we're silencing our journalists. Although at the same time, we've seen a lot of talk about these, they're being referred to now as activist journalists, which is infuriating because Indigenous people have been trying to tell their own stories. You put a bunch of like white journalists in there and suddenly they're like activist journalists. And it's just like, okay, well, what about all of the Indigenous people that have been trying to tell this story? You have not been listening. All of a sudden you get the title of activist journalist and you're, acting like, you're some sort of like a renegade, when in fact, like you're part of the machine, right? So anyway, that's... Yeah, and so it's really important, again, just to remind everybody that, we need to be consuming Indigenous media, especially when it comes to Indigenous issues, like that is paramount, is making sure that we're getting an Indigenous perspective, that we're listening to not only Indigenous journalists, but, even the way that, journalism works in this country there's a lot of gatekeeping, right? And so making sure that we're listening to people who are boots on the ground, right? But anyway, so... there was a press release that went out yesterday, and I guess CGL, for anybody who's unfamiliar, stands for Coastal GasLink. The Coastal GasLink company is asking Slato to provide documentation to prove that she is Wet'suwet'en, and they're seeking conditions that would bar her from returning to the home that she shares with her husband and their 3 children on Wet'suwet'en territory. And so, CGL has appointed themselves as this arbiter of, whether or not she should be allowed to return onto the territory. There's also Chief Wu's daughter, Jocelyn Alex status that's being challenged as a Wet'suwet'en person because she has Indian Act status with her mother's First Nation. And so for anybody who's unfamiliar with the way that the Indian Act works, the Indian Act is patriarchal, and it doesn't recognize indigeneity that's passed on through the mother's lineage. It can only be passed on through the father. And so because of that, they're challenging their Indigenous identity based on these colonial terms, right? So it's really important to remember that. There are arguments about the elected band councils that have already agreed to allow CGL to continue to build the pipeline on traditional Wet'suwet'en territory. But part of the problem is that the elected bound council, first of all, so that is a colonial structure. The way that they were elected is based on a system that was implemented through the Indian Act. And so it discounts the authority of the hereditary chiefs. And the hereditary chiefs have all stated that they do not give consent to the continuation of the pipeline, right, on Indigenous land. The other thing that's really important to remember is that the hereditary chiefs governance system predates colonization, right? And it is still in existence. People still follow that. So there was a landmark case that was passed in 1997. The Wet'suwet'en and the, you'll have to forgive me if I butcher it, but the Gitshun hereditary chiefs, they were the ones who were the plaintiffs in this landmark case called the Delgamuuk Gisdaway Aboriginal Title case, and it went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court agreed that the Supreme Court of Canada basically conceded that it affirmed their right to exclusively use and occupy the land, right, that was never ceded, right? So they have exclusive right to to use and decide to use the land and decide how it's going to be used going forward. Having said that, it was the hereditary chiefs who were the plaintiffs in that case, not the elected band council. And so it's really important to make that distinction, because when that case was upheld in the Supreme Court of Canada, it was upheld on the premise that because the land was unceded, right, they did not have to adhere to the colonial way of like these colonial systems, right? And that includes anything that falls under the Indian Act, because since it's unceded land, it does not apply, like the Indian Act does not apply, right? So now for people to say things like, well, all of the elected band council, they all agree to the use of the land for, the CGL pipeline to go through. Well, yeah, they do, but they also don't have any authority there, right? And the Supreme Court of Canada upheld that decision back in 1997. So there are a lot of different arguments that are happening right now. And what it ultimately boils down to is the fact that the settler colonial nation state known as Canada refuses to acknowledge Indigenous sovereignty. And so everything that we've seen from the federal government with regards to Truth and Reconciliation Day, right, which, we've only had one Truth and Reconciliation Day, which, that it means nothing when 5 minutes later we're like violently invading Wetsuweten territory and like sovereign Indigenous territory. We're violating the agreements that we made, like going all the way back to when the treaties were first written. We're still violating that to begin with. And so even the NDP, the NDP in British Columbia, they, are useless in all of this and are just like, well, we're going to defer to the experts, which are the RCMP. And it's like, but they're not the experts, right? They are, the violent colonizer that is enforcing these laws that don't apply in that particular territory, right? And so, we see that violence perpetuated over and over and over again centuries later, even after all of these like symbolic gestures that are ultimately empty, right? These empty gestures of like reconciliation. And so there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of rage happening. And so yesterday when we saw those marches, we're seeing them all across the country, that there are marches taking place and demonstrations taking place in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en. People's tempers are running high. Alberta, of course, that depends heavily on oil in the economy, is like really up in arms about it, where it's basically like, like blue collar workers that are like championing this pipeline, many of them that are like really aggressively at war with demonstrators. And so there is a lot going on. Hey guys. So yeah, so there's a lot to unpack. Also, if you guys have any thoughts, feel free to chime in, drop us a line in the comment section. We want to hear what you guys are thinking about all this. So Mars, were you at the demonstration yesterday?
No, I had a migraine, but I have a few friends who showed up, and they were able to say that it was, a really good show of people. It was
over really 100 people. Yeah, shut down the traffic on the high level bridge, which is amazing.
And if you guys follow Prairie Safety Protectors, they posted a few videos because they were there and they were taking videos, so I was able to see their stories and stuff, what they saw. But yeah, they said it was a really good turnout. There's a few people on my timeline who were not expecting the NDP, Alberta's NDP, to be there, but the fact that they weren't there was like noticed. So it's one of the things where like you don't expect them to, but then when they don't show up, you definitely like, well, NDP values should be about upholding the environment and climate justice and all that stuff, and it all should be as our leaning party about Indigenous sovereignty. And they really show their colors when they don't show up. And so it was I know I had a few posts earlier today basically updating people. By the way, like the NDP wasn't there, big surprise. So I mean, I think it's I'm kind of in that camp of people whose tempers are, because I feel like earlier is like I still obviously I said it earlier, and I think this is like probably like the observation I had this year is that people who there are people who've gotten a lot better, like who are selfish after everything that happened year they kind of realized like, oh shit, the forest fires are really out of control. Oh shit, the floods, that's weird. There used to be lakes and rivers there, but then when colonialists came, they like turned that into land, and now, oh look, the water is coming because obviously water was meant to be there. Like those are the natural pathways that those rivers and streams and lakes had. So it's really telling that some of us have gotten better and we've kind of evolved in the last 2 years, and then there's other people who have certainly devolved and certainly become more self-aggrandizing and definitely more narcissistic and self-serving. So it's it's kind of depressing, but I mean, I think why I'm also not surprised when shit like this is happening. Like I don't even get frustrated anymore. I'm just like, which is sad. Tanya, you know me, and I'm usually like pretty glass half full, silver lining person, but I'm no longer. I'm jaded and cynical, which didn't think I would get to this point.
I never thought you'd get to this point either, to be honest. Yeah, I've been shitting on everything for a long time, but you were like my little like ray of sunshine. And one of the things that we're seeing too with this, we're talking about the climate crisis right now, and it's amazing to me to see that, the federal government is they're sending, like they're investing so much money into squashing these, these like land defenders, right? And people that are defending their ancestral territories, right? And people who have every right to do that on their land. And we're literally like at war with the sovereign nation, and it's in these people are defending the land. We're in the middle of a climate crisis, and so many of the like I said, the flooding and the landslides that we're experiencing in British Columbia right now are due largely, in fact, to this massive deforestation that's happening right now. And so on the one hand, we have all of these resources that we could be putting towards like relief and that kind of thing because the damage is done, right? I mean, we need to stop anyway, but the damage is done, and we could be allocating these resources there. And instead, these resources are continuously being allocated to like the perpetuation of, the violence and the literal cause of the climate crisis that we're experiencing. So like that dissonance that exists at the federal level is really astounding to me. And even, and not just at the federal level. I mean, we're seeing that at every possible level of government. And that, our outrage is like, directed. I say our outrage, but I mean like public outrage right now. The collective outrage is like, directed at land defenders as opposed to, companies like CGL. And so, one of the things that is really telling right now, hereditary chiefs, they also propose like an alternate route to for the pipeline. I mean, if they're going to build the pipeline anyway, the last thing you want it to do is for the pipeline to pass through what they call like source water, right? And what's really fascinating to me is that so CGL rejected that. They said it was, that it wasn't feasible, i.e. to reroute it would be too expensive, right? And they're never going to reroute that through white communities. They're going to pass that through Indigenous communities, because who cares about Indigenous people, right? So but it's also really interesting to me to see the way it's like this calculated effort for corporations to use their power to override these fundamental human rights. And so this has been a longstanding campaign over a number of years, and it's been a very concerted effort where it is like well documented that that CGL paid informers to quell internal dissent within the First Nation against the project at the cost of financial consideration. So one of the things to consider is that this elected band council has given their consent for CGL to continue to build the pipeline. But remember that often these elected band councils are forced to make really difficult decisions in order to be able to provide for their bands, right? There needs to be a way to like fill in gaps, because the Indian Act has created like such a shortage and like a bottleneck of resources when it comes to meeting the needs of Indigenous communities, right? And so, band councils are constantly looking for ways to like make money and provide for the good ones anyway, right? Because you're going to have, the fact is that, poverty and lack of access is going to, can often lead to corruption, right? And that is like universal, right? So sometimes, there's a criticism that there's like a mismanagement of funds or whatever, but you understand how those circumstances come to be when you consider how difficult it has been to exist as an Indigenous person, within your community and outside of your community in this country, right? So
sense that like they're corrupt. I like really want to make it clear like that's not what we're saying either.
No.
It's just as it like explaining that.
Yeah. So anyway, sometimes these band councils are forced to make really difficult decisions that they wouldn't make if they had better alternatives, right? And so to just act like, oh well, they already gave their consent, it's like, okay, well, under what considerations or like under what like pressures did they give their consent? Because it is widely believed that many of the people who are living in Wetsuweten who support this, they don't have like all of the information, right? And so many of the people that are supporting this initiative are doing so out of like an extreme financial duress, right? You need to get that money coming in, you need to create those jobs, you need to create the opportunity for people to provide for themselves. And so it's really important to consider that perspective before you say, oh well, they already gave their consent, right? The other thing is that there has been an effort to create an irrevocable consent that would be supported through legislation. And that's a really dangerous precedent, because what it does is it acts to dissuade band members from engaging in any internal dissent after the decision's been made, after it's been granted. And again, with limited information, right? So they're being forced to make these decisions. And then, with the idea of irrevocable consent, what you have is, as more information comes to light, there's no way to go back on it, right? And so, once the pipeline is built, there is really no recourse through the Canadian legal justice system. And so it's really important to consider that perspective as well when we're talking about the way that consent was given. And so this is really, really dangerous, because this has been an ongoing effort from CGL in Indigenous communities going back and like several years. I mean, with the CGL pipeline that's being built right now on Wet'suwet'en territory, I believe the documentation goes as far back as 2016, but I mean, I could be off on that. It could be like much older than that. So it's really important to remember that as well. So there are a lot of layers to what is happening right now and why people are protesting. And so with the arrest of these journalists, again, people aren't getting the full story, and Canadian media is only running like parts of it, right? So there are a lot of gaps in these stories, and CGL is banking on like the misinformation and people not bothering to educate themselves. So it's really, really important, again, that we be getting like Indigenous perspectives, that we be consuming Indigenous media whenever possible. That's my baby in the background. Yeah, so there's a lot going on. So what can we do right now? What can we do as Canadians, as people who support Indigenous sovereignty? First thing you need to do is reach out to your MLA and reach out to your MP. And make sure that we are hounding them. Phone calls. We created in our link tree, there is a link for that'll take you to another link tree, and it's basically a directory for how to reach various levels of government to petition them for any number of reasons. So this is a great example for what we want you guys to use that for. Make sure that you're reaching out. You need to be calling them, and you need to be writing emails. If you send an email, you will have that documented, and then put them on blast on social media. Tag them on social media. Let them know that you're watching. Okay, that's first and foremost. The next thing that you need to do is make sure that we're hounding the media, and we need to be amplifying Indigenous journalists. We need to be amplifying Indigenous media sources. Okay, that we should be doing that anyway, but like make sure that we are sharing from Indigenous media sources. Mars, do you have any other ideas for what we can be doing right now?
To also, like, another big thing is like to inform yourself, to be honest. Like the misinformation that's always like the reason that so much that there's so much white noise, and that there's so many misunderstandings. Like you were saying, like a lot of people, especially in our dear province, that's blue collar and very reliant on oil. A lot of people are angry with the are activists, when in reality, you know, these big projects, reason for, you know, all of the global warming and all of the crises that we're seeing is because of big corporations. It's because of, you know, government, you know, giving them more sovereignty and giving them more power over things that they really shouldn't be having power over. In countries like Brazil, you see it in countries like, you know, like even Guatemala, where they have like Canadian mining companies are, you know, extracting a whole bunch of resources. Like we made a big stink about Australian mining companies coming to, you know, the Rockies and extracting a whole bunch of minerals from Alberta. But then Canadian companies are doing the same thing to other countries south of, you know, south of Mexico. So, you know, we can't have it both ways. Like Canada really needs to take a look in the mirror, see how hypocritical we are. We say that we're peacekeepers. We say that we are for, you know, Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous rights, and then we always fuck up. We always do the worst. We are fucking hypocrites. We are a racist country. We are a fucking elitist country. Honestly, the way that this country is, we're no better than the US, and we always like to say we're better than them. Fuck that. We are just as bad. Sorry. I'm really pissed off.
But where's the lie? Where's the lie? I'm also putting together a list of articles and resources that we can share that we're going to post in the link tree as well. In order to help keep everybody informed, there was a really, really great article that came out. It's actually from 2019, and it's called "Corporations Don't Seem to Understand Indigenous Jurisdiction," and that provides a lot of clarity. There is an active like campaign on behalf of the federal government to like officiate where Canadian jurisdiction ends and where Indigenous jurisdiction takes over. So it's really important that we keep that in mind. I'm going to link to that article for sure. I've got a bunch of other articles that I referenced to make sure that I was educating myself. And of course, if you guys have any thoughts or if you guys want to fact check us or whatever the case may be, shoot us a message anytime. We are not perfect, and we understand that our perspective comes as non-Indigenous people living in so-called Canada. So if you have any additional resources that you think would be helpful, feel free to send them to us. And as always, if you have any thoughts, shoot us a DM. I don't have anything else right now. Marce, any thoughts?
No, I just what you said. We are very careful when we handle or we tackle subjects that are not personal to us. For instance, like we are, you know, people from, you know, diaspora of where we're both central. We have a very different. So we try to. We're very hesitant about sharing anything that is not from our perspective. However, this is an important thing because it is something that's happening now, and we need to all be incensed, and we all need to be aware of what's happening, and we all need to be raising voices to, you know, champion and land defenders, because really they're the ones that are lines, are the ones that are risking their necks for us. So,
and we should ultimately, at the end of the day, we should all be land defenders.
We should.
We all have a responsibility to defend the land that we live on. So I'm just going to leave that there. So thank you to everybody who tuned in for our new Tuesday Charla.
Yeah.
We love you. We love you. We love you. Send us your thoughts. Feel free to DM us at any time. We are extremely responsive, guys. We love you. Marce, I love you. It's so good to see you. You look beautiful, by the way.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.